1720s. Bayeux Cathedral is examining its treasury. They have an old embroidery, only displayed once a year to air them during nice weather. 2025. The Bayeux Tapestry is one of the most recognisable images in Britain, used in blockbuster movies, advertising campaigns, and a violent press war, an unquestionable part of our national heritage. But what if we do question it? What propelled this moth-eaten fabric from the catacombs of obscurity into international fame? What led to it becoming the subject of an endless procession of overpriced collectibles? Using the idea of an object's cultural biography, we can examine how meanings were made, trends curated, and identities moulded through time. Join me in this series where I examine piles of rocks, stones, and squishy stuff to answer the question of why you should care, and more importantly, who decided that. Today we are travelling back almost 1,000 years, and I may hop across the channel to the town of Bayeux to examine history's first cartoon strip, and who decided to thrust it into our conscious. Here it is. Impressive. Stretching out a very dignified 70 metres, the tapestry leaves most who experience it quite satisfied after the 20-minute tour of Bayeux Museum. It tells the story of the struggle between Harold Godwinson and William of Normandy to succeed Edward the Confessor as King of England, culminating in Harold getting a nasty case of iitis, or being hacked to bits depending on your interpretation.
It is in fact a very sophisticated piece of Norman propaganda. That's right, even its name is a lie. It's not a tapestry, it's an embroidery. Where did it come from? Who made it? Unfortunately, there are still many things we don't know. Its life before its first mention in the Bayeux Cathedral industry in 1476 is pure speculation, and its subsequent centuries wasn't much to write home about either.
Lying forgotten in the dusty cellars of a small town in France, the Bayeux Tapestry wasn't the most obvious candidate as a battlefield for Georgian French-British struggles. But then, in the early 18th century, everything changed. It was chanced upon by the French Antiquarian Society, and soon rumours of this strange and barbarous piece sailed the Channel and conquered the ear of eccentric secretary of the London Society of Antiquarians, William Stukeley. Stukeley became the first English person to write about the tapestry, and predictably the first to claim this noblest monument of English antiquity abroad. But interest was still largely confined to the academic world. It would take the upheaval of post-revolutionary France to catapult the tapestry into popular fame. The tapestry survived the French Revolution by a thread, and now found itself in the grips of a society seeking to weave itself a new identity. And soon a new leader stepped up, one Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon appreciated the value of propaganda, especially good historical parallels, and in the Bayeux Tapestry hit the bullseye, or rather, Harold's eye.
Indeed, the Bayeux Tapestry, with its tale of defeat by the English by seaboard invasion, must have felt like a sign from God. Halley's Comet all over again, and Napoleon made sure not to waste his gift. There followed a wave of exhibitions, newspapers, and plays in Paris. The French must have been rather sick of this ugly scrap of fabric by the time Napoleon was exiled. The English certainly were.
All this French noise was so unpleasant to English ears that it revived the dying Society of Antiquaries to try to claim it back. The fact was that, with all this French disruption, and with industrialisation tearing people from their rural roots, Britain was edging into a medievalist turn based on an idealised domestic past. In everything, from art to law, 19th century medievalists sought to link this past to modern identities. And to do this, the Antiquarian Society felt it was important to send artist Charles Stothart and his novelist wife, Eliza, to Bayeux in 1818 to make a British copy. It often seemed as if the two nations were in competition. Sadly, we're 15 years too late for that to have been the real Carla Higgs, but our IT group did the best with what they had. Nations? But Nuria, I hear you saying, I thought nations as we know them didn't exist in the olden days. Well, it's funny you mention that.
This is the 19th century, and Europe had entered into a new era of statehood, nation building. For nations to exist, for arbitrary geographical boundaries to be accepted, a new form of identity had to be produced, one defined by a set of values and memories that were materialized in physical objects, and embodied this new nation. This new culture, this apparently eternal history, was official heritage.
In the midst of this medievalist turn, the tapestry was offering something that met current tastes, a competition against the French, and a story connected to England, all at once, an irresistible combination for English tourists at all times. From Alfred Lord Tennyson to William Morris, English artists and authors and academics just kept coming and coming, creating a messy situation that poor Bayeux just wasn't prepared to deal with. According to historian Laura Jane Smith, it's this process of passing and receiving these identity-defining memories, the embodied heritage work, which gives the objects value. With repetition came recognition, and with recognition, identity. Before long, Harold had become a national symbol, and 1066 a year of national tragedy. In doing so, the artistic elite presented a new idea for what it meant to be English, or rather, what it meant to be an English man. Which is strange, because medievalism was actually a uniquely accepting topic for women to stitch their names into, and the tapestry more than anything.
The historical distance of this medieval past allowed female authors to reflect on contemporary issues without openly threatening the male establishment. These women were fed the official line of new Victorian heritage and realised that they too could hark back to the past that the tapestry embodied into a time of perceived greater rights and female agency.
Significant among these were educated women with direct experience of embroidery, most controversial of whom was Agnes Strickland. Chapel Rowan says only a woman can treat a woman right, and 200 years earlier, Agnes Strickland said only a needlewoman could treat the tapestry right, or something along those lines. An ironic claim given that Strickland incorrectly referred to it as cross-stitch, but this is a woman supporting women series, and since she'd never had a chance to see it, we won't judge too harshly. The same can't be said for her contemporaries, such as the boys' school teacher John Collingwood Bruce, who mocked Strickland and argued for male authorship of the tapestry.
To have made the tapestry was seen as reason to claim ownership of it, and of the history and values it was thought to embody. So who had the right to write about this history? If Strickland argued that men didn't, because they didn't know about the craftswomanship, male writers countered with the claims of male authorship because of the masculine subject matter. And for Victorians, there was one thing that no woman could imagine, even more than politics. That's right, penises.
One of the first to mention this was the creator of the Bayeux collections, Jacques Lafferté. The wifeless, childless abbot knew everything there was to know about women, which is why in 1873 he could confidently declare, "Scenes that decency should have forbidden, how can one admit that a woman executed such work?" Of course, that's not what he actually sounded like because he was French, but you get the gist. The first woman to explicitly tackle this was poet and historian Ella Burton in 1878, with the reminder, "What is thought good taste in one century is thought bad taste in another," and so opened another battlefield over ownership and heritage.
Of course, the French still had the actual tapestry, which made all these English debates about ownership seem a bit hollow. But how, aside from launching a full-out heist, could the English materialise their claims on home soil? The 19th trend for replicas seemed to provide the answer.
Replicas were considered valuable to the educational mission of national museums. They made material accessible to larger audiences and allowed museums to expand their collections. With this in mind, in 1873 the South Kensington Museum sent an expedition to create a full-size photographic copy of the tapestry, carefully edited of course to not shock the respectable public. So the South Kensington Museum sought to claim the tapestry for a modern national heritage. But replicas also allowed smaller museums to accumulate the collections needed to embody community heritage. In this way, and putting Strickland's words to effect, the friend of William Morris, Elizabeth Wardle, decided to make a replica so that England may have a copy of its own. According to Lady Marian Alford of the Royal School of Needlework, it was inherent in the nature of Englishwomen to employ their fingers. As proof, Wardle's Leek Embroidery Society worked long and hard to create a full-size replica for the sanitised South Kensington photos. Unlike the original, each woman signed her section with her name. Completed in 1885, it became a local and national sensation, touring Britain and abroad for a decade until it was sold for the Reading Museum.
By the end of the century, through constant embodied heritage and meaning-making, the tapestry had become inextricably sewn into ideas of Englishness. But the 20th century brought a change in international relations, with France becoming ally and a new opponent setting in: Germany.
In 1940, Germany again penetrated France and brought with them a new culture looking for material proof. To Himmler, the Bayeux Tapestry, showing a Germanic people successfully invading England, seemed like an already made propaganda film, and he wasted no time in sealing the German claim. The tapestry was inspected, photographed, and used in 2 SS films while researchers tried to prove its Germanic origins. Even in 1944, with the Allies landing in Europe, Himmler ordered the tapestry moved across war-torn France in the hopes of snatching it into Germany. It did not make it out of Paris. The tapestry found itself perfectly placed in the Louvre for its reopening in November, once again the subject of adoration, attention, and a storm of press discussion. It had survived neglect, revolution, and now world war, claimed by 3 nations, by battles over gendered expectations and aesthetic fashions. It had become an important literary and visual shorthand for nationality, identity, and the authenticity of the medieval story, and the subject of endless interpretations across countless mediums. The first film, the first cartoon, the Bayeux Tapestry is used in research inexhaustibly up to the present day. As a result, the Bayeux Tapestry and the story it tells have become tightly woven into the identity of Britain at both official and local levels, a cornerstone of our national heritage.
And today, even people as ordinary as you and I can make our own masterpieces, to make our mark on the unfolding tale of the Bayeux Tapestry.